The Mafia Bosses twins screamed every night at 3 a.m. Doctors said it was night terrors. But when the maid finally tore open their favorite teddy bear, she found the monster the girls had been warning them about all along. Lily and Rose Starks were only 6 years old, twin daughters of the Starks Empire, one of the most feared criminal organizations controlling New York's shipping docks. This family moved $200 million in contraband annually, with connections reaching from the mayor's office to the federal courthouse. The girls were everything to Rory Starks, the man whose tattooed hands had signed death warrants without hesitation, the man who could silence entire city blocks with a single phone call. But for the past 8 weeks, Rory Starks had been completely powerless as he watched his daughters deteriorate before his eyes. Every night at exactly 3 a.m., both girls would bolt upright simultaneously, clutching their heads, screaming the same words, "The monster is buzzing! Make it stop!" Their cries shattered the silence of the 12-bedroom estate in the Hamptons. Lily's voice, hoarse from nights of screaming. Rose's tears, endless and inconsolable. And then when exhaustion finally dragged them back to sleep, the cycle would reset. 3 a.m., like clockwork, like torture. Rory spent whatever it took. Dr. Kenneth Andrews from Mount Sinai examined them for 3 days straight, running MRIs, EEGs, blood panels. He found nothing. A child psychologist from Columbia diagnosed twin escalation syndrome and prescribed therapy. It didn't help. A sleep specialist from Boston Children's Hospital installed monitoring equipment throughout the nursery and watched the twins thrash and scream on camera and admitted defeat. Dr. Kenneth Andrews arrived at the Starks estate on a Tuesday morning with the kind of confidence that comes from 20 years of pediatric neurology and a resume that included advisory positions at 3 Ivy League hospitals. He swept through the marble foyer with 2 junior physicians trailing behind him, their leather bags stuffed with instruments that looked more suited to a research lab than a child's bedroom. Rory met them at the base of the grand staircase, his jaw tight, eyes bloodshot from another sleepless night. He didn't offer his hand, just jerked his head toward the second floor and led them up in silence. The nursery was a disaster. Toys scattered across plush carpet, sheets twisted and damp with sweat. The twins sat together on the edge of the bed in matching white nightgowns, looking far too small and too fragile for a room this large. Lily's hair hung limp around her face. Rose had stopped crying somewhere around dawn, but her eyes were still red and swollen. Dr. Andrews smiled at them with practiced warmth, the kind of smile that worked on normal children in normal homes. "Good morning, ladies. I'm Dr. Andrews. I'm here to figure out why you're not sleeping well." Rose buried her face in Lily's shoulder. Lily just stared at him with hollow eyes. The examination took 40 minutes. He checked their pupils with a light that made them flinch, listened to their hearts and lungs, asked them to follow his finger with their eyes, tested their reflexes with a small rubber hammer that made Lily jerk her leg so hard she nearly kicked him. The whole time, his junior doctors took notes on tablets, murmuring medical jargon that meant nothing to Rory, but somehow made his chest tighten with dread. Finally, Dr. Andrews stepped back and removed his stethoscope. He glanced at his colleagues, who both gave him subtle nods, then turned to face Rory with an expression that was meant to be reassuring, but landed somewhere closer to patronizing. "Mr. Starks, I've completed a thorough examination. Neurologically, both girls are completely healthy. Their reflexes are normal, cognitive function is age-appropriate, and there are no signs of seizure activity or structural abnormalities based on the scans Dr. Mitchell performed last week." Rory's hands curled into fists at his sides. "Then why are they screaming every night?" Dr. Andrews folded his arms, or settling into the tone of a man explaining something simple to someone slow. "What we're looking at here is a textbook case of psychological dependency. The twins are feeding off each other's anxiety. One wakes up with a nightmare, The other wakes in response, and they escalate each other into a panic state. It's quite common in twins, actually. Common, Rory repeated, his voice dropping to something dangerous. The monster they describe, the buzzing sound, these are manifestations of shared anxiety. Young children often externalize their fears as monsters or creatures. It makes the fear feel more manageable. Dr. Andrews gestured vaguely at the room. The solution is behavioral modification. Separate bedrooms for a start. Establish firm boundaries around nighttime routines. Perhaps a mild sedative to break the cycle. They don't need sedatives, Rory cut in. They need you to find out what's wrong with them. Mr. Starks, I understand this is frustrating, but there is nothing medically wrong with your daughters. Dr. Andrews's patience was beginning to fray. What they need is structure and consistency. Children this age are highly susceptible to... Get out. The room went silent. Even the twins looked up. Dr. Andrews blinked. Excuse me? Rory took a step forward, and something in his posture made all three doctors instinctively step back. The tattoos on his forearm seemed darker in the morning light streaming through the windows. His voice was calm, which made it worse. I flew you here from Manhattan. I paid you $10,000 for an hour of your time, and you're telling me my daughters are making it up. That's not what I... You think I don't know what my own children sound like when they're in pain? Rory's voice rose, echoing off the high ceilings. You think I've spent 8 weeks watching them fall apart because they need better bedtime stories? Dr. Andrews lifted his chin, trying to salvage his authority. Mr. Starks, if you're dissatisfied with my assessment, I'm happy to recommend other specialists, but I can assure you that my diagnosis is sound. Your diagnosis is that you don't have an answer, and you're too arrogant to admit it. Rory moved closer. The junior doctors had already backed towards the door. So I'm going to ask you one more time, very politely, to get the hell out of my house. The doctors left. Their footsteps echoed through the hallway, and then down the stairs, then faded entirely. Rory stood in the center of the nursery, breathing hard, his hands shaking with fury that had nowhere to go. That's when Veronica Cruz appeared in the doorway with fresh linens folded over her arm. She'd been waiting in the hall the entire time, staying out of sight the way good household staff were trained to do. She kept her eyes down as she moved into the room, setting the linens on the dresser. I'll change the sheets, Mr. Starks, she said quietly. Rory didn't acknowledge her. He was staring at his daughters, who had curled back into each other on the bed, exhausted and defeated. Veronica began stripping the damp sheets, moving efficiently around the room. She'd been working in the Starks household for 8 months, long enough to know when to speak and when to disappear. Right now, undisappearing seemed wise, but as she reached for the pillows, she noticed something. The teddy bear was wedged between the twins, right where it always was. It had been a gift from Aunt Susan 2 months ago, and the girls had loved it instantly. But now, as Veronica watched, she saw Lily's hand brush against the bear's fur and immediately pull back, her fingers curling into a fist. Rose shifted slightly, trying to move away from it. But then Lily reached out and pulled the bear closer anyway, tucking it between them with a strange, mechanical obedience. Veronica paused, a pillowcase half removed. She looked at the bear, looked at the girls, looked at how Rose's jaw tightened, how Lily's shoulders tensed even as they held it. They didn't want it, but they were holding it anyway, like it was a rule they'd been taught. Veronica finished making the bed in silence, her mind turning over what she'd just seen. She gathered the dirty linens and slipped out of the room without a word, leaving Rory standing guard over his daughters like a sentry who didn't know what he was fighting. The screaming started at exactly 3 a.m. Veronica was already awake. She'd been awake for the past 3 nights, sitting in the small staff room down the hall with her door cracked open, waiting, listening. The first shriek cut through the darkness like a blade, followed immediately by the second. Two voices in perfect, horrible harmony. She was on her feet and moving before the third scream came. Rory's bedroom door slammed open somewhere behind her. His footsteps pounded down the hallway, heavy and frantic. But Veronica was closer. She reached the nursery first, pushing through the door into chaos. Both girls were sitting bolt upright in bed, hands clamped over their ears, mouths open in continuous screams that didn't seem to need breath. Their eyes were squeezed shut. Tears streamed down their faces. Lily was rocking back and forth. Rose had her knees pulled up to her chest, her whole body trembling. And between them, perfectly positioned on the white sheets, sat the teddy bear. Rory burst into the room a second later, wild-eyed and desperate. He went straight to the bed, trying to gather both girls into his arms, but they were rigid, unreachable, locked in their terror. "It's buzzing!" Lily screamed. "Daddy, make it stop!" "The monster, the monster, the monster!" Rose's voice cracked, going hoarse. I'm here, Rory said, but his voice was breaking too. He looked around the room as if he could fight whatever was hurting them if he could just see it. "There's no monster. There's nothing here." But Veronica wasn't looking at the girls. She was looking at the bear. She'd been thinking about it for 3 days. The way the girls recoiled from it. The way they held it anyway. The way Lily's hand had jerked back that morning when she touched its fur. She'd been asking herself why a gift that the twins supposedly loved would make them flinch. Now, standing in the doorway while Rory tried to calm his daughters, Veronica took 3 steps forward and reached out. The moment her fingers touched the bear's fuzzy stomach, she knew. It was warm. Not warm like it had been held. Warm like something inside it was running, generating heat, and it was vibrating. Just barely. A frequency so subtle she almost missed it, but it was there, thrumming against her palm like a phone on silent mode. Her breath caught. She snatched her hand back, heart hammering, and looked around the room. Her eyes landed on the craft table in the corner where the girls did their coloring. Scissors, pink-handled safety scissors that could barely cut construction paper. It would have to be enough. Veronica grabbed them and turned back to the bed. "What are you doing?" Rory's voice was sharp, suspicious. He was still holding the twins, but his eyes were on her now. Veronica didn't answer. She reached for the bear. "Hey." Rory shifted, putting himself between her and the girls. "What the hell are you—" "It's hot," Veronica said, her voice cutting through the screaming. She met his eyes. "Touch it. The bear is hot." Rory stared at her like she'd lost her mind. But something in her face must have registered, because he reached out one tattooed hand and pressed it against the bear's back. His expression changed instantly. "What?" Veronica didn't wait for permission. She grabbed the bear with her left hand, positioned the scissors with her right, and drove the blades into the seam along its spine. "Stop!" Rory lunged for her, but she was already pulling, ripping, tearing through stitching that was stronger than it should have been. The fabric split. Synthetic stuffing burst out in a cloud of white fibers that filled the air like snow. Veronica kept cutting, kept pulling, her hands moving on pure instinct now, tearing the bear apart with the same focused intensity she'd once used as a nursing assistant, cutting away clothing to reach a wound. More stuffing. More fabric. Her fingers found something hard. She ripped away another layer, and then the room exploded with light. A red glow pulsed from inside the destroyed bear, sharp and rhythmic like a heartbeat. Veronica's hands were full of white stuffing and torn fabric, but there, nestled in the center of the carnage, was a small black device. Circuit board. Tiny LED light. Wires. A speaker grill no bigger than a dime. The screaming stopped. The silence was so sudden it felt like pressure in Veronica's ears. She looked up from the device in her hands to the bed. Both girls had gone quiet. Their hands had dropped from their ears. They were staring at the torn bear, at the pieces scattered across the sheets, at the glowing red light in Veronica's palm. Lily's mouth was open, but no sound came out. Rose's chest was heaving with sobs, but they were silent now, just gasping breaths. Rory stood frozen, his arms still around his daughter's, his eyes locked on the device. "What?" His voice was barely a whisper. "What is that?" Veronica turned the device over carefully. The red light pulsed again, and she felt it vibrate in her hand. A thin wire extended from one end, connected to what looked like a tiny camera lens. "I don't know," she said quietly, but it was inside the bear. The room was still. Even the air seemed to have stopped moving. The only sound was the twins' ragged breathing and the soft electrical hum coming from the thing in Veronica's hands. Rory reached out slowly and took the device from her. He stared at it, his face going through a dozen expressions in the span of seconds. Confusion, recognition, understanding, and then rage. Pure, cold, murderous rage. His hand closed around the device so tightly his knuckles went white. When he spoke, his voice was quiet and deadly calm. "Someone put this in my daughter's room?" It wasn't a question. Veronica looked at the twins. They had curled into each other, exhausted and confused, but quiet. Finally quiet. Their eyes were starting to close. "Yes," she said. "Someone did." By 4:30 a.m., the nursery had transformed into something resembling a crime scene. Rory had made 3 phone calls, and now the room was occupied by people who didn't normally work together. Doctor. Andrew stood near the window, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. Rory had called him at 3:47 a.m. and made it very clear that returning to the estate was not optional. The doctor had arrived 40 minutes later, still wearing yesterday's shirt under his coat, his earlier confidence completely stripped away. Next to him was a man named Joseph Riley, a former military electronics specialist who now did private security consulting for clients who paid well and asked few questions. He sat at the twins' craft table with the device laid out in front of him, a jeweler's loop pressed to his eye, probing the circuit board with a pair of precision tweezers. Veronica stood in the corner, still holding the destroyed teddy bear. No one had asked her to leave, but no one had invited her to stay either. She'd simply remained, watching everything unfold with quiet intensity. The twins were finally asleep in Rory's bedroom down the hall, the door locked, a security guard stationed outside. Riley set down his tools and leaned back, letting out a low whistle. This is sophisticated work. Military-grade components, custom fabrication. He picked up the device carefully, turning it to show them the miniature speaker. This is a parametric speaker array, highly directional. It can emit sound that only travels in a very narrow beam. "English," Rory said. "It's a sonic weapon." Riley pointed to the circuit board. Designed to emit a high-frequency sound that adults can't hear but children can. The frequency range is specifically calibrated, probably between 14 and 18 kilohertz. Or most adults lose the ability to hear those frequencies by their mid-20s. He tapped the tiny camera lens. "And this is recording everything. Whoever built this wanted to watch what happened." The room went very quiet. Dr. Andrews cleared his throat. His face had gone pale. That would explain the symptoms." Rory turned to look at him, and the doctor actually took a step back. "Would it?" Rory said flatly. "High-frequency sound at the right amplitude can cause severe physical distress." Dr. Andrews' voice was strained, professional pride warring with obvious humiliation. Nausea, vertigo, panic attacks, headaches. The symptoms the girls described, the buzzing sensation, the feeling of something in their heads, that's consistent with acoustic trauma. And you didn't think to check for that. It wasn't a question. Mr. De Starks, this kind of device is extremely rare. The symptoms they presented looked exactly like. You told me they were making it up. Andrews flinched. I said it was psychological dependency, which, given the information available at the time, was a reasonable diagnosis. My daughters have been tortured for 8 weeks, Rory said quietly. Every night at 3 a.m., this thing has been going off in their room, emitting a sound that made them feel like their skulls were splitting open. And you told me they needed better bedtime routines? The doctor opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing he could say. Riley was still examining the device. The timer here is set for 3 a.m., runs for approximately 20 minutes. That's long enough to cause significant distress, but short enough that residual symptoms would fade by morning. He looked up at Rory. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. This wasn't some off-the-shelf harassment device. This was custom-built to target children specifically. Veronica's voice came from the corner, quiet but clear. The bear was a gift. Everyone turned to look at her. She held up the destroyed plush toy. Aunt Susan brought it 2 months ago. She said it was custom made in Europe, special order. Rory's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. A tightening, a focusing. The girls loved it immediately. Veronica continued. And the screaming started that same night. Riley picked up the device again, studying the camera with his loupe. The wireless range on this is decent. Maybe 50 meters. Whoever planted this could have been monitoring from anywhere in the house or on the grounds. The recorded footage would upload to a paired device, probably a tablet or laptop. Could you trace it? Rory asked. If the receiving device is still nearby and powered on, maybe. But whoever set this up is smart. They might have already scrubbed it. Rory walked to the window, staring out at the dark grounds of the estate. The sky was starting to lighten at the edges, dawn creeping in. Behind him, Dr. Andrews shifted nervously, clearly waiting to be dismissed. Riley continued his examination, making notes on his phone. Veronica watched Rory's reflection in the window glass. She could see his mind working, processing, calculating. This was the man who controlled criminal operations across 3 states. Oh, the man who built an empire on reading people, on seeing patterns, on understanding threats. And someone had put a weapon inside a child's toy and given it to his daughters. When Rory finally spoke, his voice was perfectly calm. This wasn't random. No, Riley agreed. Definitely targeted. Someone had this device made. Someone had the bear made to hide it. Someone gave it to my children knowing exactly what it would do. Rory turned from the window, and his face was carved from stone. Someone has been watching my daughters scream every night for 2 months. He looked at the teddy bear in Veronica's hands. The custom European bear. The special order. Mr. Starks. Dr. Andrews started, but Rory cut him off with a gesture. You can go. Send your bill to my accountant. The doctor hesitated, perhaps wanting to apologize, and to explain, to salvage something. But the look on Rory's face made it clear the conversation was over. Andrews gathered his things and left quickly, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Riley packed up the device carefully. I can have my lab run a full analysis, might find a manufacturer signature, component sourcing, something that tells us where this came from. Do it. Rory's eyes were distant now, thinking through implications. And Joseph? Keep this quiet. No police, no federal agencies. I handle this internally. Riley nodded and left with the device secured in a metal case. That left Rory and Veronica alone in the nursery as dawn broke outside. The room looked wrong in the growing light. Torn stuffing scattered across the floor. The craft scissors lying on the bed. The empty space where the teddy bear used to sit. Who gave them the bear? Rory asked quietly. You said Aunt Susan. Be specific. Veronica set down the destroyed toy. Your sister, Susan Thompson. She visited 8 weeks ago. She brought the bear in a white gift box tied with ribbon. She told the girls it was made special, just for them. Rory was very still. She insisted they sleep with it every night. Veronica added. She said it would protect them. The silence stretched out, filled with the weight of realization. Finally, Rory spoke, and his voice carried the cold certainty of a man who had just identified his enemy. Family, he said. It's always family. By 7 a.m., the estate had become a fortress. Rory stood in his study surrounded by 6 of his most trusted men. They'd arrived within an hour of his calls, and summoned from their homes across the city with the kind of urgency that meant someone was about to die. The room smelled like coffee and gun oil. A map of New York's dock territories was spread across the desk, marked with red and blue circles indicating controlled zones. The Southside crew has been pushing into our territory for months, Rory said, pointing to a cluster of red marks near the Brooklyn waterfront. 3 weeks ago, they hit one of our shipments. 2 weeks ago, they bought off one of our customs contacts. He tapped the map hard enough to make it shift. This is their move. This is how they strike. His lieutenant, a man named Patrick Donnelly with a scar running through his left eyebrow, leaned forward. You think they'd go after your kids? I think they'd do whatever it takes to break me. Rory's voice was steel. And for 2 months, it was working. We can mobilize by tonight, Patrick said. Hit their operations at the docks. Send a message they can't ignore. No. The word came from the doorway. Everyone turned. Veronica stood there in her uniform, holding a silver tray with Rory's breakfast that she'd been sent to deliver. But she wasn't moving to set it down. She was standing very still, looking directly at Rory with an expression that was far too bold for a housekeeper. Patrick's hand moved toward his jacket. Who let the maid in here? I let myself in, Veronica said calmly. And you're about to start a war with the wrong people. The room went dangerously quiet. 2 of the men actually reached for their weapons. Rory held up one hand, stopping them, but his eyes on Veronica were cold. You have something to say. I say it quickly. Veronica set the tray down on a side table and walked to the desk. She looked at the map, at the men surrounding it, at the preparations for violence that were clearly already in motion. The Southside gang didn't give your daughters that bear, she said. They could have had someone plant it. Your sister gave them that bear. Veronica's voice was quiet but firm. Susan Thompson walked into this house 8 weeks ago with a white gift box. She handed it directly to Lily and Rose. She told them it was made special in Europe, just for them. She insisted they sleep with it every night. Rory's jaw tightened. Susan wouldn't. Susan has visited 4 times in the past 2 months. Veronica continued. Every visit, she checked on the girls. Every visit. No, she asked them if they were still sleeping with their special bear. Every visit, she spent time in the guest wing that overlooks the nursery. Patrick looked between them, confused. Your sister, the one who... Susan is family. Rory cut him off. She's been nothing but supportive since the girl's mother died. She helped me hire the staff. She arranged for their tutors. She gave them a weapon disguised as a gift. Veronica stepped closer to the desk, and several of the men tensed, but she ignored them. Mr. Starks, the Southside gang wouldn't have access to military-grade sonic devices. They wouldn't know to calibrate it to a frequency that only children can hear. They wouldn't have the patience to watch and record for 8 weeks without making another move. She pointed at the map. This is a criminal operation, and it's fast and loud and obvious. What happened to your daughters was slow and precise and hidden. Whoever did this knew the house, knew the routines, knew exactly where to place the device for maximum effect. Rory's hands were flat on the desk, his knuckles white. You're accusing my sister of torturing my children. I'm telling you who gave them the bear. That doesn't mean who else has been in the nursery unsupervised. Veronica's voice rose slightly, losing some of its careful deference. Who else could have ensured the girls kept the bear with them every night? Who else had the access and the opportunity? Patrick cleared his throat. Boss, she's got a point. If someone on the inside was working with the south side— Susan isn't working with them! Rory snapped. She wouldn't sell out her own family for— He stopped mid-sentence, his face changing. Veronica saw the moment it clicked. The realization that had been trying to surface since dawn, finally breaking through. The trust fund, Rory said quietly. The room waited. When the girl's mother died, she left everything to the twins. $3 million held in trust until they're 18. If anything happens to them, if they're declared incompetent, if I'm declared unfit as a guardian— He looked up at Veronica, his expression shifting from anger to something colder. Susan is named as secondary guardian. She'd control the money. She'd control everything. Patrick let out a slow breath. And if the girls are having psychological breakdowns that you can't handle, the doctors can't treat— Child services would step in. Rory straightened, his tactical mind finally engaging with the right target. They'd remove the girls from my custody. Susan would file for guardianship. She'd present herself as the stable, caring aunt who warned everyone that my lifestyle was dangerous for children. Veronica nodded slowly. And she'd have medical records from 8 different specialists all saying the girls were deteriorating under your care. The silence in the room was absolute. Rory stared at the map on his desk, at the red circles marking enemy territory, at all the preparation for the wrong war. Then he looked up at his men. Patrick, I want surveillance on Susan's apartment. I want her phone records, her bank statements, her travel history for the past 6 months. I want to know everyone she's talked to and everything she's bought. On it. Quietly. She can't know we're looking. Patrick nodded and pulled out his phone, already typing. Rory turned to Veronica. His expression was unreadable, but something in his posture had shifted. A grudging respect, maybe, or just the acknowledgement that she'd kept him from making a catastrophic mistake. Thank you, he said. Veronica picked up the breakfast tray. The girls are awake. They're asking for you. I'll be there in a minute. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Mr. Starks, your sister is coming for Sunday dinner tomorrow. You confirmed it last week. Rory's smile was cold and sharp. Perfect. We'll be ready for her. If you're enjoying the story, smash that like button, then the subscribe button. Your support means a lot to me, more than you know. Thank you. Susan Thompson arrived at noon on Sunday with a casserole dish and a practiced smile. She swept through the front door in a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than Veronica made in a month, her hair pulled back in a neat chignon, diamond earrings catching the light. She handed her coat to the butler and immediately started up the stairs without waiting to be announced. Rory, girls, I brought lunch. Veronica was in the upstairs hallway when Susan reached the landing. They nearly collided, and for just a moment, something flickered across Susan's face. Not quite surprise, more like a hunter spotting unexpected movement in the brush. Veronica, isn't it? Susan's smile didn't reach her eyes. Where's my brother? He's with the twins in the playroom. Aye, Mom. Perfect. I'll just peek in on them first. Susan moved past her and pushed open the nursery door, probably intending to leave her purse there like she always did. Then she stopped. The room had been cleaned. The bed was made with fresh sheets. The toys were organized. But pieces of the destroyed teddy bear were laid out on the dresser like evidence at a crime scene. The torn fabric, the synthetic stuffing, the empty cavity where the device had been hidden. Susan stood completely still in the doorway. What happened? Her voice was very controlled. Veronica had been watching from the hallway. The bear was damaged, Mom. Damaged. Susan turned slowly, her eyes locked on Veronica now. That was a custom piece. I had it made in Belgium. It cost $1,500. Yes. And ma'am? Who damaged it? I did. The words hung in the air between them. Susan's expression shifted through several emotions before settling on outrage. You destroyed a gift I gave to my nieces. The bear was making them sick, Mom. Susan's laugh was sharp and disbelieving. Making them sick? A stuffed toy? Yes, Mom. You're insane. Susan pushed past her, heading for the playroom with quick, angry steps. Rory, we need to talk about your staff. The playroom door opened and Rory emerged looking exhausted. He'd been up for 36 hours straight. The twins were visible behind him, playing quietly with blocks, both of them wearing the kind of fragile calm that comes after trauma. Susan. His voice was flat. Your maid destroyed the bear I gave the girls. Susan gestured back toward the nursery. The custom bear. She just decided to tear it apart. I know. Susan stopped mid-sentence. You know? I was there when she did it. Then why is she still employed? Susan's voice rose, perfectly calibrated outrage. Rory, I understand you're under stress, but you can't let the staff destroy property just because there was a device inside the bear. Susan blinked. What? An electronic device. A sonic emitter. Rory was watching his sister's face carefully. It was emitting a high-frequency sound that only the girls could hear. That's what was making them scream every night. Susan's expression transformed into exactly the right mixture of shock and horror. Oh my God! Are you serious? The bear I bought them had something inside it? Custom made in Belgium, you said. From a specialty shop in Brussels. I had it commissioned months ago. Susan's hand went to her mouth. Rory, I had no idea. How could I have known? I bought it from a reputable dealer. Who? What? What's the name of the dealer? Susan hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Maison de Rêve, en rue des Chartreux. They do custom work for collectors. She turned back toward the nursery. I still have the receipt somewhere. This is horrifying. We should contact them immediately, file a complaint. The device was recording. Rory said quietly. Susan froze again. When she turned back, her face had rearranged itself into confused concern. Recording? Video and audio. Someone was watching the girls scream. That's... Susan swayed slightly, reaching for the wall. That's sick. Who would do something like that? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Susan's eyes went to Veronica, who was still standing in the hallway. And you're sure it was in the bear? Not placed there afterward? I'm not accusing anyone, but... She let the implication hang. Veronica felt the shift in the room, the way Rory's gaze flickered to her, then back to his sister, the way doubt crept into his exhausted features. The device was sewn into the bear, Veronica said carefully. It was integrated into the original construction. But you're the one who found it, Susan pressed. After it was supposedly there for 2 months? After dozens of doctors examined the room? She turned to Rory. I'm just saying, it's convenient. The maid, who no one was paying attention to, suddenly discovers evidence that exonerates everyone except... Except what? Rory's voice was sharp, but there was uncertainty underneath it. Except the possibility that someone on your staff planted it more recently. Susan stepped closer to her brother. Rory, you're not thinking clearly. You haven't slept in days. Someone could be taking advantage of that. Veronica watched Rory's face, saw him processing, calculating. He was so tired, so desperate for answers. And Susan was family. She was saying what a concerned sister should say. Veronica has been here for 8 months. Rory said slowly. And how much do you really know about her?" Susan's voice was gentle now, persuasive. "Did you run a full background check? Does she have nursing training? Medical knowledge? Access to specialty equipment?" The questions hung in the air like accusations. Rory looked at Veronica, really looked at her, and for the first time since she'd torn open the bear, she saw suspicion in his eyes. "I was a nursing assistant," Veronica said quietly. "Before I came here, I was fired for questioning a doctor's diagnosis." She met Rory's gaze directly. "I know what it looks like, but I didn't plant that device. I found it. After conveniently destroying the evidence," Susan said. "The bear itself could have told us where it really came from. Now all we have is a device that could have been purchased anywhere and placed there by anyone." Rory rubbed his face with both hands. "I need to think. What you need is to be careful," Susan said softly. "Someone hurt your daughters. Don't let them manipulate you into trusting the wrong people." She touched his arm, sisterly and concerned, then glanced at Veronica one more time before heading toward the playroom to see the twins. Veronica stood alone in the hallway, watching Rory's shoulders sag under the weight of doubt. And she realized that Susan Thompson was very, very good at this. Veronica waited until after midnight. She'd spent the evening serving dinner, watching Susan charm her way through the meal with stories about childhood memories and concerned questions about the girl's recovery. Rory had been quiet, withdrawn, clearly still turning over his sister's words from that afternoon. When Susan announced she'd stay the night in the guest wing rather than drive back to her apartment, Rory had simply nodded. Now the house was dark and silent. Susan's door had been closed for 2 hours. Veronica had watched the sliver of light beneath it go out at 11:30. She stood in the hallway outside the guest suite, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. If someone caught her here, she'd be fired. Or worse. Rory was already doubting her. Susan had planted that seed expertly. But Veronica had been a nursing assistant long enough to recognize a manipulator when she saw one. She'd watched doctors cover their mistakes by blaming nurses, watched administrators protect their reputations by sacrificing staff. Susan's performance that afternoon had been textbook deflection. And there was something else. Something that had been nagging at Veronica since she'd torn open the bear. The device had a camera. It was recording. That footage had to go somewhere. And she pulled the master key from her pocket, the one the head housekeeper had given her for emergencies, and slid it into the lock. The mechanism turned with a soft click that sounded deafening in the quiet hallway. Veronica slipped inside and closed the door behind her. The guest suite was pristine. Susan had always been neat, almost obsessively so. The bed was made with military precision. Clothes hung in the closet, organized by color. Toiletries on the bathroom counter were arranged in perfect rows. Veronica stood in the center of the room and tried to think like someone hiding something valuable. Not the closet, too obvious. Not the bathroom, too humid for electronics. Not the dresser drawers where housekeeping might find it while putting away laundry. Her eyes went to the bed. She knelt down and lifted the dust ruffle, shining her phone's flashlight into the space beneath. Nothing but pristine carpet. She stood and pulled back the decorative pillows one by one. Nothing. Then she stripped back the comforter and top sheet. The mattress looked normal, but when Veronica pressed her hand against it near the headboard, she felt something solid underneath. Not springs, something flat and rectangular. She pulled the fitted sheet loose and ran her fingers along the seam where the mattress met the box spring. There, a small slit in the fabric, barely visible, expertly stitched to look like part of the original seam. Veronica worked her fingers into the opening and felt cool metal. She pulled carefully, and a tablet slid free from its hiding place inside the mattress. It was a newer model, expensive, with a black case. The screen was locked, but when Veronica pressed the power button, it lit up asking for a passcode. She tried the obvious ones. 00001234. Susan's birthday that she'd overheard mentioned at dinner. Nothing worked. Then she noticed the fingerprint sensor. Veronica looked at the door. This was already breaking and entering. What she was thinking about doing next crossed into territory she couldn't come back from. She thought about Lily and Rose, about their screams, about 8 weeks of torture that nobody believed was real. She made her decision. Veronica tucked the tablet under her arm and left the guest suite, locking it behind her. She moved quickly down the hallway to the playroom where the twins had been earlier. Susan had spent 20 minutes with them, touching everything. The dollhouse, the wooden blocks, the art supplies. Veronica found what she was looking for on a plastic teacup from the toy kitchen set, a clear thumbprint on the pink surface. She pulled out a roll of clear packing tape from the supply closet, pressed it carefully against the print, and lifted. The impression transferred perfectly to the tape. Back in her own small room off the kitchen, Veronica positioned the tape over the tablet's sensor and pressed. The device unlocked. The home screen was sparse, a few standard apps, but one folder was labeled Monitoring, with a small red notification badge showing 847. Veronica tapped it with shaking fingers. The folder opened to reveal a custom application. The interface was simple, a live feed window that currently showed static, and below it a menu with options for playback and logs. She selected logs first. The screen filled with timestamps, hundreds of them, all at 3 a.m., going back months. 3 a.m., device activated, duration 22 minutes, 3 a.m., device activated, duration 23 minutes, 3 a.m., device activated, duration 21 minutes, on and on, every single night for the past 8 weeks. And before that, test runs, shorter durations, different times, someone calibrating, experimenting, perfecting the timing and intensity. Veronica's hands were trembling as she opened the playback menu. Video files, organized by date. The most recent ones were corrupted. The device had been destroyed, the feed interrupted. But older files were intact. She selected one at random from 6 weeks ago. The video opened with a night vision view of the nursery. The twins were asleep, curled together in their bed. The timestamp showed 2:59 a.m. Then 3 o'clock hit. Both girls jolted awake simultaneously. Their mouths opened in screams Veronica couldn't hear through the tablet's muted speaker. They clutched their heads, twisted in the sheets. The camera captured it all in perfect, terrible detail. And in the bottom corner of the screen, barely visible, was a small notation. Recording 47. Response excellent. Subject A and B both showing peak distress markers. Maintaining schedule. Veronica felt sick. This wasn't just about money or custody. Someone had been studying the twins' suffering, documenting it, taking notes like they were lab specimens. She scrolled through more logs, her horror growing. Untest notes appeared every few days. Increased frequency by 2 kHz, enhanced response. Extended duration. Subjects showed sustained elevated cortisol. Reduced volume by 15%, still effective. This had been planned, calibrated, refined over months. And Susan's fingerprints were quite literally all over the device that controlled it. Veronica heard a sound in the hallway. Footsteps. She shut off the tablet and tucked it under her pillow, just as someone knocked softly on her door. "Veronica." It was Rory's voice. "Are you awake? We need to talk." Veronica opened the door with the tablet still hidden beneath her pillow behind her. Rory stood in the hallway looking haggard, still dressed despite the late hour. "I can't sleep," he said, "and I keep thinking about what Susan said, about you, about the timing. Mr. Starks. I need you to be straight with me. Did you plant that device?" Veronica met his eyes. No. Then why did you really tear open that bear? Don't tell me it was just a hunch. She hesitated. This was the moment. She could tell him about the tablet, show him the evidence. But before she could speak, footsteps rushed down the hallway behind Rory. Susan appeared, her hair loose around her shoulders, wearing a silk robe. Her face was flushed with what looked like panic. Rory, thank God you're here. Someone's been in my room. Rory turned. What? My jewelry case. It's been moved. The lock on my suitcase was tampered with. Susan's eyes landed on Veronica standing in her doorway. Her expression shifted to understanding, then accusation. It was you. I didn't touch your jewelry, Veronica said. You were in my room. Susan stepped closer, and Veronica could see the calculation behind her eyes. You've been in there going through my things. Susan, slow down. Rory said, What exactly is missing? I don't know yet. I just woke up and noticed things weren't where I left them. The lock, Rory. Someone picked the lock on my luggage. She pointed at Veronica. And she's the only one with keys to the guest rooms. Veronica's mind raced. She could deny it, but Susan would push. And if they searched her room right now, they'd find the tablet under her pillow. Check her room, Susan said, as if reading her thoughts. If I'm wrong, I'll apologize. But if she's been stealing from this family... I haven't stolen anything, Veronica said quietly. Then you won't mind if we look. Susan was already moving towards the door. Rory held up a hand. Susan, this is my house, and I'm your sister who just had her privacy violated. Susan's voice cracked perfectly. Please, Rory, I know you're under stress, but if someone on your staff is taking advantage... Rory looked at Veronica. Exhaustion and doubt warred across his features. Do you have anything in your room that belongs to Susan? This was it. Veronica could lie. She could deny everything and hope they didn't find the tablet. Or she could trust that somewhere beneath the stress and manipulation, Rory still cared more about his daughters than his pride. Yes, she said. Susan's eyes widened in theatrical shock. You admit it? I took something from the guest suite. Veronica kept her gaze locked on Rory. Not jewelry. Evidence. She stepped back into her room and pulled the tablet from beneath her pillow. When she turned back, Susan's face had gone very still. That's mine, Susan said quickly. My personal tablet. You had no right. It's connected to the device that was hidden in the bear. Veronica held it up. It has months of activation logs, video recordings of the twins screaming, notes about increasing the frequency to make them suffer more. Rory reached for the tablet, but Susan grabbed his arm. She's lying, Susan said. She probably put those files on there herself. Rory, she broke into my room and stole my property. This is exactly what I warned you about. Then let him look at it. Veronica interrupted. Let him see the timestamps. Let him watch the videos. Videos that could have been faked by anyone with basic editing skills. Susan's voice was rising now, losing some of its control. She's been setting this up from the beginning. The bear, the device, now this. She's trying to frame me. Why would I do that? Veronica asked. Money, blackmail. Who knows what you're planning? Mr. Starks. Veronica spoke directly to Rory, ignoring Susan completely. I don't care if you believe me about the theft. I don't care if you fire me. But your daughters, Lily and Rose, they've been tortured for 8 weeks. Someone watched them scream every single night and took notes about how to make it worse, and the device that did it was controlled from this tablet. She held it out to him. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to look at what's on here and decide for yourself. Rory took the tablet from her hands. Susan made a sound of protest, but he silenced her with a look. The passcode, he started. It's already unlocked, Veronica said. Open the folder labeled Monitoring. Rory tapped the screen. His face was unreadable as he navigated through the menus. Veronica watched his eyes move, scanning the logs, the timestamps, the notes. Susan had gone very quiet beside him. "These activation times," Rory said slowly. "They match. Every night at 3 a.m. Those could be fabricated." Susan tried again, but her voice had lost its conviction. Rory opened one of the video files. Even without audio, Veronica could see the moment he recognized what he was watching. His daughters, screaming in the dark, the timestamp in the corner, the clinical notation at the bottom of the screen. His hand started shaking. "Rory." Susan reached for the tablet. He pulled it away from her, his eyes never leaving the screen. He played another video, then another. His face had gone completely white. When he finally looked up, his gaze went straight to his sister. "This was in your room," he said. His voice was empty, hollow. "She planted it there. She's trying to—" "This has your fingerprints on it, doesn't it?" Rory asked. "Your data. Your account." Susan's mouth opened, closed. For the first time since she'd arrived, she had no practiced response ready. Rory looked at the tablet one more time, at the logs showing months of systematic torture, at the notes documenting his daughter's suffering like it was a scientific experiment. Then he looked at Veronica. Get Patrick on the phone," he said quietly. "Tell him to come back to the house. Now. If you are still listening and you haven't subscribed yet, you might have to reconsider your decision." Patrick arrived within 20 minutes, accompanied by 2 other men who moved through the house with the practiced silence of people accustomed to cleaning up problems. Rory had them secure the guest wing first, then bring Susan to the study. By the time she entered, Rory had been through every file on the tablet. Susan walked in still wearing her robe, flanked by Patrick's men but not restrained. She still had her dignity, her composure. She looked at Rory sitting behind his desk with the tablet in front of him, at Veronica standing in the corner, at Patrick by the door. "This is ridiculous," Susan said. "I'm your sister. If you'd just let me explain." "Sit down," Rory said quietly. Something in his voice made Susan stop mid-sentence. She sat in the leather chair across from the desk, her hands folded in her lap. Rory turned the tablet to face her. The screen showed the logs Veronica had found. Hundreds of timestamps, all at 3 a.m., stretching back months. August 15th, 3 a.m., device activated for 18 minutes. His voice was completely flat. August 16th, 3 a.m., device activated for 20 minutes. He scrolled down. August 17th, August 18th, August 19th, every single night, Susan, for 8 weeks. Susan's face remained carefully neutral. "I don't know what that is or how it got on my tablet. There are video files." Rory continued, as if she hadn't spoken. 47 of them. Night vision footage of Lily and Rose screaming. "You want to know what's interesting? The file names. They're labeled Test 1, Test 2, and so on. Like you were running experiments." He swiped to another screen. "And these notes. Increased frequency, better response. Extended duration, sustained distress. Subject A showed signs of exhaustion. Reducing schedule may decrease effectiveness." Rory looked up at her. "You were refining it, making it worse." "Rory, someone is setting me up. There are audio files too." His finger hovered over the screen. "Did you know the device recorded ambient sound from the room? It was supposed to just capture the girls' reactions, but it picked up other things, like voices in the hallway outside. Voices that came through clearly when you visited." Susan's composure cracked slightly. "What voices?" Rory pressed play. The speakers filled with static first, then the sound of children crying, muffled and distant. Then a woman's voice, clear and cold, speaking just outside the nursery door. "Still screaming, I see. Poor little things. So weak, just like their mother." It was unmistakably Susan's voice. Another file, another snippet of audio. He can't even protect his own children from bad dreams. Pathetic. The whole city fears Rory Starks, and he's completely helpless against a stuffed toy. Susan had gone very pale. Rory played a third file. This one was longer, captured during one of Susan's visits 6 weeks ago. Her voice was casual, conversational, talking to someone on the phone while standing in the hallway. Doesn't suspect a thing. The doctors think it's psychological, the specialists are stumped, and he's falling apart. Give it another month and child services will have to step in. Once I have guardianship, the trust fund transfers to me as their legal representative. $3 million, plus whatever I can liquidate from his accounts before anyone notices. A man's voice responded, too muffled to make out words. Susan's laugh came through clearly. He won't contest it. He'll be too busy trying to save his criminal empire. And even if he does, what judge is going to give custody to a mobster who can't keep his children safe? I'm the respectable one, the successful businesswoman, the concerned aunt who tried to help. The recording ended. The room was absolutely silent. Rory leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving his sister's face. When he spoke, his voice was so quiet it was almost a whisper. "You tortured my daughters." Susan's mask finally shattered. "Rory, listen. You put a device in their room that made them feel like their heads were splitting open. For 8 weeks, every single night. You watched them scream. You took notes. You adjusted the settings to make it worse. It wasn't supposed to hurt them permanently. You were going to take them away from me." Rory's hands were flat on the desk, but Veronica could see them trembling. "You were going to use their suffering to steal my children and their inheritance. They would have been fine eventually," Susan said, and her voice had shifted now, losing the pretense of innocence. "Children are resilient. A few months of therapy and they would have forgotten all about it. It was a means to an end. A means to an end." Rory repeated the words like he was tasting something poisonous. "My daughter's pain was a means to an end. You act like you're innocent." Susan snapped, her composure breaking completely. "You built your fortune on violence and crime. You've hurt hundreds of people. Don't pretend you have any moral high ground here. Those people knew the game they were playing." Rory stood up slowly. Lily and Rose are 6 years old. Susan stood too, facing him across the desk. "They're also sitting on $3 million that they don't need and won't appreciate. I deserved that money. I'm the one who stayed legitimate, who built a real business. Who didn't become a criminal like our father. So you decided to steal it by breaking your nieces' minds. I decided to take what should have been mine in the first place." Susan's voice rose, all pretense of control gone. "Their mother was nobody. A waitress who got pregnant and trapped you into marriage. She didn't earn that money. She didn't deserve it. And those girls are just—" Rory's hand slammed down on the desk so hard the wood cracked. Susan fell silent. When Rory spoke again, his voice had dropped back to that terrible quiet. "Get her out of my house," he said to Patrick. "Take her somewhere quiet. Keep her there until I decide what to do with her. Rory, I'm your sister. My sister died the first time she activated that device." He picked up the tablet and held it up. "This thing is a stranger who tried to destroy my family." Patrick moved forward with the other men. Susan backed toward the door, her face finally showing real fear. "Rory, please, we can work this out. We're blood—" "You should have thought about that before you made my daughters scream." They took her out of the study. Her protests faded down the hallway, then disappeared entirely when a door closed somewhere in the house. Rory stood alone behind his desk, still holding the tablet, staring at the screen showing months of calculated torture. Veronica remained in the corner, unsure if she should leave or stay. Finally, Rory looked at her. "Thank you," he said. His voice was hollow. If you hadn't found this—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. 3 days later, Susan Thompson's apartment was found empty, and her bank accounts had been drained. Her phone was disconnected. According to official records, she'd left the country for an extended trip to South America. No return date scheduled. No one asked Rory what really happened. No one wanted to know. The guest wing was stripped and cleaned, every surface scrubbed, every piece of furniture replaced. By the time the work was done, there was no trace that Susan had ever stayed there. The nursery got the same treatment. Veronica supervised the renovation personally. New paint on the walls, a soft lavender that Lily had picked from a color chart. New curtains that Rose said looked like clouds. The old furniture was donated, replaced with pieces that the girls chose themselves from a catalogue, circling their favorites with colored markers. The bed where they'd spent 8 weeks in terror was gone. In its place were 2 smaller beds, positioned close enough that the twins could hold hands across the gap if they wanted to, but giving each of them their own space. And new toys, dozens of them, carefully selected and thoroughly inspected. Veronica sat at the craft table with a screwdriver and a seam ripper, methodically checking each stuffed animal before it entered the room. She opened seams, felt for hard objects, examined the stuffing under bright light. Rory had offered to hire a security company with X-ray equipment, but Veronica insisted on doing it herself. She needed to know. Needed to be certain. Lily and Rose watched from their new beds as Veronica inspected a soft grey elephant, turning it over in her hands, pressing gently along every surface. "Is it safe?" Lily asked quietly. Veronica smiled at her. Completely safe. Just a regular elephant. No batteries, no electronics, just stuffing and fabric. She handed it to Lily, who hugged it tentatively at first, then tighter when nothing bad happened. Rose received a pink bunny that passed the same inspection. She tucked it under her chin, her eyes already heavy. It was 8:30 p.m., a normal bedtime for normal children. Rory appeared in the doorway, watching. He'd been doing that a lot over the past few days, standing in doorways, observing his daughters like he was memorizing them, making up for the weeks when he'd been too focused on finding external threats to see the one that had been invited into his home. "Story time," he announced, holding up a book. Both girls perked up. This was the new routine. Rory read to them every night now, no matter what business needed his attention. The underworld could wait. The docks could wait. His daughters came first. He settled into the chair between their beds and opened to a marked page. His voice, usually sharp with command, softened as he read about a bear who lived in the woods and made friends with the forest animals. Veronica moved to leave, but Rory gestured for her to stay. She stood by the window, watching the twilight settle over the estate grounds, listening to Rory's voice weave the story. Behind her, she could hear the girls' breathing starting to slow, becoming deeper and more regular. By the time Rory finished the chapter, both twins were asleep. He closed the book carefully and stood, looking down at them. Lily had rolled onto her side, one arm draped over her new elephant. Rose's bunny had slipped down to rest against her chest, rising and falling with each peaceful breath. Rory walked to where Veronica stood by the window. They both looked out at the darkening sky in silence for a moment. "The doctors told me I was imagining things," he said quietly. "That the girls were fine, and I was the one who needed help managing my stress." He paused. "You were the only one who believed them." "I was the only one who was paying attention," Veronica replied. "No." Rory shook his head. "Patrick pays attention. The security team pays attention. The specialists I hired were supposed to pay attention, but they were all looking at the wrong things, looking at symptoms and statistics and theories." He turned to face her. "You looked at my daughters, at what they were trying to tell us." Veronica didn't know what to say to that. "I'm making some changes to the household." Rory continued. The girls need stability, consistency, someone who puts their well-being first. He met her eyes. I'd like you to be their governess, full-time. You'd live in the family wing, handle their education and care, have final say on anything involving their safety. Mr. Starks, it comes with a salary increase, significantly, and authority. The staff answers to you on matters involving the twins. The security team defers to your judgment. Even I clear decisions about them through you first. Veronica looked at the sleeping girls, at Lily's peaceful face, no longer tight with fear, at Rose's relaxed posture, no longer braced for 3 a.m. to arrive. I'm not formally trained, she said. I'm not a teacher or a nanny. You saved them when no one else could. Rory's voice was firm. You risked your job, your safety, to find the truth. That's worth more than any credential. Veronica thought about her small room off the kitchen, about 8 months of keeping her head down, staying invisible, never speaking up because she'd learned that lesson too well at her last job. Then she thought about tearing open that bear, about refusing to stay silent even when it meant Rory might not believe her. I accept, she said. Rory nodded, something like relief crossing his features. Good. I'll have the contracts drawn up tomorrow. He left, closing the door quietly behind him. Veronica moved to the chair he'd vacated, settling in between the 2 small beds. Through the window she could see the night settling in fully now, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. It was almost 3 a.m. when Lily stirred. Veronica tensed, old instincts kicking in, and waiting for the screaming to start. But Lily just rolled over, pulling her elephant closer, and settled back into sleep without a sound. The clock on the wall ticked past 3 o'clock. Then 3:01, 3:02. Silence. Perfect, peaceful silence. Veronica let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She pulled a blanket over her lap and leaned back in the chair, her eyes moving between the 2 sleeping girls. Not the maid anymore, not the invisible help who cleaned up after others. Their guardian, their protector, the one who would make sure nothing ever hurt them again. Outside, the world Rory controlled continued its dark business. Inside this room, under Veronica's watch, 2 small girls slept without fear for the first time in months. And that was all that mattered.